The desert sun burned like Judgment Day over Perdition Flats, where vultures circled above and hope went to die. Dust rolled off the plains in lazy spirals, settling on the warped wood of the auction scaffold rising like a gallows in the center of town. Folks gathered in the square, boots creaking on the parched ground, guns holstered but hands twitching. It wasn't the kind of place a man came to out of curiosity. Not unless he had ice in his veins or something broken inside. Silas Kane dismounted slowly, the creak of his saddle the only sound he made. He tied his horse to a cracked hitching post and squinted toward the crowd. His coat, once Union blue, had faded to a dusty gray, like everything else he carried, worn, tired, but still functional. He adjusted the brim of his hat and moved with the deliberate care of a man who'd seen more violence than peace and didn't trust either. He told himself he was just passing through. That he only came to see the spectacle. The infamous auction Perdition Flats held once a month. A grotesque kind of tradition the law pretended not to see. He wasn't here to play hero. He'd buried that part of himself 7 years ago along with everything that mattered. A voice called out from the wooden platform. "Ladies and gents, gather close now. We got ourselves a fine selection this evening." The crowd murmured with anticipation. Prospectors with dust in their beards, gamblers in patched vests, mercenaries with too many scars. Silas stood near the back, his eyes hidden beneath the brim, but his gaze sharp, cataloging every face, every rifle, every exit. He wasn't looking for trouble. But trouble had a way of recognizing him anyway. Colonel Jasper Maddox strutted across the scaffold, his boots polished, his coat still bearing Confederate brass. The man looked like war that never ended. He held a riding crop and a silver flask, toasting the crowd as if this was a social event, not a meat market. Now, Maddox grinned, eyes gleaming, "Ain't no need to get antsy. We'll get to the goods. Just want to thank y'all for keeping Perdition Flats the free and prosperous place it is. This ain't the East. This is the real world. Out here, a man makes his own law, and his own fortune." The crowd hooped. Maddox raised his flask higher. Silas didn't move. His jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. He wasn't sure why he hadn't left. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe he'd grown too numb to care. Maybe he just wanted to see how far the world had fallen. They brought out the first two, a strong-limbed young man and a woman with bruised arms. Their faces were covered with burlap sacks. The man fought, earning him a rifle but to the ribs. The woman didn't resist. Just stood there, silent as bids were thrown like dice. Silas barely heard them. His gaze drifted, not to the stage but to the shadows beyond. A shape moved behind the curtains. Smaller. Slower. He felt it before he saw it, something like a cold knife sliding down his spine. When the third figure was dragged into the light, the crowd quieted. There was a strange kind of tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. "She's the crown jewel tonight," Maddox announced. "Young, delicate. A rare find out here. Bet you city boys ain't seen nothing like her." Silas took a step forward without meaning to. He couldn't see much, just the slight curve of shoulders beneath torn calico, the tremble in her knees. A drunken miner shouted, "Let's see her face." Maddox obliged. He yanked the sack away with a flourish, like a magician revealing a trick. But it wasn't magic that followed. It was silence. Cold, bone-deep silence. Silas's breath caught. His legs folded. He hit his knees like a man shot. Her hair was lighter now, sun-bleached and wild. Her face was older, dirted by dust and fear. But the eyes were the same, wide, dark, and searching. Haunted, yes, but still hers. Claire. His daughter. He didn't cry. Couldn't. The tears had been burned out of him years ago. But his whole body screamed with the realization. Every memory of that night, the fire, the screams, the way he dug through the ashes until his hands bled, came rushing back. He'd buried an empty grave. The only thing he found was a locket. Hers. Now here she was. Alive. But not whole. She didn't recognize him. Not really. Her gaze passed over him like wind over stone. Empty. Confused. Or worse, convinced he was someone else entirely. Bidding starts at 500. Maddox called. Voices erupted around Silas like gunfire. Men shouted numbers, waved gold, raised weapons in mock cheers. Silas rose, slow and trembling. His hand hovered near his revolver. "No," he muttered. No. His world had been remade in a single breath. Someone grabbed his shoulder. "Easy there, friend," said a voice behind him. A tall man, maybe a tracker or merc. "Ain't your turn yet." Silas shrugged him off. His mind raced, calculating. There were too many of them. Maddox had guards. Shooters on rooftops. Too many eyes. Too many barrels. This wasn't a fight he could win straight up. But he wasn't going to let them take her. Not again. He stepped forward only to have a rifle block his path. "Back up," growled a guard. "This ain't your show." Clara flinched at the sound, her eyes scanning the crowd. She looked right at him. Held there. And something flickered. Recognition? Oh, or just fear. It didn't matter. Not yet. Silas turned, walked away slow. His step felt like betrayal. Behind him the bidding climbed. Maddox laughed like a man who'd never lost anything worth keeping. Silas kept walking. Around the side of the saloon. Into the alley. Past the broken fence. And then he leaned against the wall, slid down and stared at the dirt. He didn't shake. Didn't scream. Just breathed. Just counted the seconds. Just waited for the rage to settle into something usable. There was no law here. No cavalry to call. No justice. Only him. And her. And the men who stood between. He remembered something Clara used to say back when bedtime stories were still part of their world. Monsters aren't real, Papa. Not if you're watching. He had stopped watching once. Just once. Now he'd never look away again. Somewhere in the distance the crowd roared. A bell rang. The auction was over. He had lost her again. But this time he'd seen where she went. And there was no place in Perdition Flats she could be taken that he wouldn't follow. The desert wind howled through the alleyway. A fly landed on his boot. He crushed it without looking. He stood, eyes clear, heart cold. He would need guns. He would need luck. And he would need to remember what kind of man he used to be before the grief took it all. Because he hadn't just come to watch. He had come home. And Perdition Flats didn't know it yet, but Judgment had just walked into town. The sky had turned the color of bruised peaches when Silas Kane returned to Perdition Flats under cover of dusk. The heat had lessened, but the tension in his chest had not. He moved like a man caught between two lives, one he had lost and one he wasn't sure he deserved to get back. Clara's face wouldn't leave his mind. Those eyes, wide, dark, empty, played over and over like a memory trying to claw its way into reality. He kept to the edges of town, slipping between buildings, avoiding the main strip where Maddox's men still swaggered with arrogance and whiskey. He needed a way in. A way to reach her. A plan. Inside the crooked old barn behind the saloon, the horses stirred as he entered, quiet as smoke. The smell of sweat and hay mixed with blood. Someone had been here recently. He stepped carefully, gun drawn, but it wasn't an ambush. Just a stable boy, a thin kid with dirt on his cheeks and fear in his eyes. The boy froze. "You ain't supposed to be." Silas pressed a finger to his lips. "Where do they keep the girl?" The boy looked away. "I don't know what." Silas grabbed his shirt. "Don't waste time. She's young. Brown eyes. Sold off today. You know." The kid swallowed. "Storage shed behind the preacher's quarters. They keep the new ones there till transport." Silas released him and dropped a silver coin into the boy's palm. "You never saw me." The boy nodded, then vanished into the hay. He watched the shadows lengthen through the barn slats and waited for full dark. His leg ached, still sore from the injury back in Dodge, but adrenaline dulled it. When the moon rose above the cliffs, he moved. He crossed the square like a ghost, hugging walls, ducking lantern light. The preacher's quarters stood behind the ruined chapel, another lie in this godless town. A thin guard smoked by the back door, rifle slung lazy across his chest. Silas took him down without a sound. The blade was quick and clean, the body caught before it hit dirt. He dragged the man into the shrubs, then slipped inside. The storage shed was worse than he expected. Crates, rope, old tools, and cages. Small ones. In the far corner, Clara sat on a thin mat, knees to chest, arms folded around herself. Her eyes were half closed, her lips cracked. But she was alive. "Clara," he whispered. She didn't move. "Clara, it's me." She raised her head slowly. Blinked. Recognition stirred, but it wasn't the kind that soothed, it was fear. She scrambled back. "No, don't, get away." Silas knelt. "It's okay. I'm here to get you out." Her hands found a rusted piece of wood and held it like a blade. "Don't touch me." "I'm your father," he said quietly. "You don't remember, but I know you. Your name's Clara Kane. You were taken from our home in Nebraska 7 years ago. Your mama, she died saving you. I searched. I never stopped. I thought you were gone." She shook her head, trembling. "Maddox said my family left me, sold me. You're one of them. You want to take me somewhere worse." "No," he said, voice rough with something dangerous. "I came back for you. She stared at him, eyes glassy. "You're lying." "Your locket," he said. "You had one with a red stone. Your mother gave it to you. She told you it would glow when you were safe." Her breath caught. Her fingers touched the spot where the locket should have been. Gone, probably sold. He pulled something from inside his coat, a dented brass medallion, soot-scarred but unmistakable. Clara stared at it like it might burn her. "I kept it," he said. "All these years." The door behind him exploded inward. Light. Noise. Shouting. Silas spun, gun drawn, but it was too late. A rifle cracked. Pain tore through his side. He hit the wall, weapon sliding from his grasp. 2 guards rushed him, dragging him up by the arms. Clara screamed, shrinking into the shadows. Maddox stepped in last, calm as ever. His silver flask glinted in the torchlight. Well, he said. "Didn't think you had it in you, Kane. Thought you'd just crawl back into the desert like a whipped dog." Silas spat blood. "You're going to die for what you did." Maddox chuckled. "A man's gotta aim higher than fairy tales." He nodded, and one of the guards punched Silas in the stomach. The world blurred, but he stayed conscious. He needed to see her, needed Clara to know he hadn't come just to die. Maddox turned to her. "He's not your father, girl. Just another drifter with a savior complex." Clara looked between them, unsure. "Take him to the barn," Maddox ordered. "Make sure he understands what happens to trespassers." They dragged Silas out. The stars above were cruel and sharp. He didn't fight. Not yet. Blood dripped from his side, hot and steady. They chained him to a beam in the barn, just high enough that his toes barely touched the ground. Then the fist started. 1, 2. Ribs cracked. I swelled shut. But pain was an old friend. It couldn't take what mattered. When they left him alone, he sagged in the chains, breath rattling. The barn smelled of horses, rot, and old metal. Clara came an hour later. She stepped inside like a ghost, bare feet silent on the straw. He couldn't lift his head, but he felt her presence. "You came for me," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Always would've," he rasped. "I don't remember." "I know." She moved closer, touched the chain, then his hand. "I thought I was nothing," she whispered. "Property. Just something passed around." "No," he breathed. "You're mine. My girl. You're not what they said." She was silent for a long time. "I want to believe you," she said. "But I don't know what's real." He opened his eye. "Start with this. I came back. That's real enough." She nodded. "I think I used to dream about someone like you. A man who smelled like gunpowder and leather. Who had soft eyes when nobody was looking. I used to dream you'd forgive me for not saving you sooner." Her lip quivered. She stepped back, and the distance between them felt like years. "I can't open this chain," she said. "I don't need you to," he murmured. "Just stay alive." She turned and fled into the night. Silas hung there, bleeding, but something inside had changed. The fire that had died long ago burned again. He didn't know how or when, but he was going to get her out. Even if it killed him. He wasn't finished. Not yet. Outside, the desert wind howled again. The vultures still circled overhead. But they were mistaken this time. This man wasn't dead. Not by a long shot. The morning broke sluggish and sullen, a gray film clinging to the horizon like ash that refused to drift away. Perdition Flats slept late after nights like that, nights filled with firelight and human auctions, laughter from whiskey-wet throats, and fists thrown for sport. But Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of a rusted cot in the preacher's quarters, staring at her hands. Dirt creased her knuckles. Blood, not her own, had dried beneath her fingernails. She couldn't remember how it got there. She couldn't remember a lot of things. But she remembered his voice. Not Maddox's. The other man. The one who bled for her. Claire. That was the name he'd said. The name that sounded like a lullaby she'd once known. It hummed under her skin, not loud, not urgent, but steady. A thread in a tapestry she'd forgotten was hers. They told her she was sold off by her family. Told her she was lucky to be alive. That the world was cruel and she was only ever going to be a piece on someone else's board. But something had cracked open when she saw the look in that man's eyes. Raw, broken, desperate. People didn't fake that kind of pain. Not well. She hadn't told Maddox about the conversation. She'd pretended to still believe his lies. Smiled when she had to. Nodded when he spoke of her sail south, the caravan that would come tomorrow at dawn. But inside she was somewhere else. Somewhere warmer. Somewhere with soft hands and a fireplace, and a man who smelled like saddle leather and would smoke. A man who told stories in the voice of someone who believed the world could still be good. And his name? He hadn't said it, but the memory pressed against the edges of her thoughts like a door swelling in its frame. She stood and crossed the room, careful not to wake the guard dozing in a chair by the doorway. His hat had slipped down over his eyes. His rifle rested loosely in his lap. She stepped over a squeaky floorboard and eased into the hallway, breath held. If Maddox found her near the barn, she'd pay in blood. But she needed answers. Not guesses, not fragments, truth. Outside, the air was cool and damp, a brief mercy before the sun made the earth boil again. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and hurried down the path behind the chapel, boots silent against the dirt. The barn rose ahead, crooked and scarred. She moved to the side window and pressed her eye to a crack in the wood. The man was still there. Chained, slumped, head lowered. Blood painted his shirt. But he was breathing. She slipped around back and entered through the small rear door. He didn't stir until she stepped in front of him. One eye cracked open, ringed in bruises but alert. "You came back," he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I couldn't stay away," she replied. I think I know you." His expression didn't shift, but his shoulders lost some of their tension. "I was afraid you wouldn't come," he murmured. "I'm afraid too," she said. "I think Maddox wants to sell me south." "He does," he said. "He'll make sure you disappear forever." Clara crossed her arms. "I don't know who I am. But I want to find out." "You're my daughter," he said. "That's where we start." Silence filled the barn like smoke. She stared at him, at the broken lines of his face, at the stubborn defiance that lived in his posture even now. Part of her wanted to run. Another part wanted to fall into his arms and sob until she could breathe again. "You said my name used to be Clara Kane," she whispered. "It still is," he said. "They couldn't take that from you." She knelt beside him. "You said you came back for me. I never stopped looking." She nodded slowly, like someone testing the shape of a prayer on their lips. Then suddenly she stood and moved to the wall. Behind the bales of hay was an old toolbox. She opened it, rummaging until she found what she needed, a rusted nail pry bar. He looked at her with something like awe as she returned and began working the chain free. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I'm more afraid of staying than running." With a final crack, the chain gave way. He groaned as he lowered his arms. She helped him up, and he leaned heavily on her shoulder. "We can't go out the front," she said. "There's a service tunnel beneath the chapel. I used it once when Maddox had me hiding from buyers. We can take it out to the cliffs." He nodded. "Let's move." They slipped from the barn into the rising sunlight, keeping to the alleyways and overgrown fences. The town stirred like a sleeping snake, sluggish but deadly. They reached the chapel unnoticed and ducked into the shadows behind the altar. Beneath a moldy rug, Clara pried up a trapdoor. The tunnel was tight, dark, and smelled of mildew and rot. But it led them outside the town walls, up to a craggy overlook where the land fell away into a canyon. They emerged into the open, gasping for air and sunlight. Silas leaned against a boulder, clutching his side. Blood still seeped through his shirt. "You need a doctor," Clara said. "No time," he grunted. "We need a plan." "I thought getting out was the plan." He shook his head. "Maddox won't let this slide. He'll send riders. They'll catch us before sunset." Clara paced, agitated. "Then we need to stop him." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "That's not your fight." She met his gaze. "It became mine the day he sold me." Silas saw it then, his daughter not just in blood but in fire. The same unflinching resolve her mother had worn like armor. He didn't argue. Instead, he began laying out what they had. 1 revolver with 6 bullets, a knife, 2 canteens, and the terrain. They would hit him at nightfall. Burn the stockade. Use the chaos. Free the others. Draw Maddox into the open. A suicide mission maybe. But it beat running. They rested through the afternoon, sheltered by the rocks. Clara cleaned his wound with a strip of cloth, her hands careful but certain. They spoke in low murmurs, about old memories, fragmented and half-remembered. The dog named Daisy. The blue ribbon she used to wear on Sundays. The way her mother would hum to herself when cooking stew. As the sun dipped, the town below lit its lanterns. Music drifted up, a banjo, rough singing, the rattle of dice in cups. Silas checked his weapon. Clara tied her hair back. When night came they would become ghosts again. But this time they'd come to haunt. As the stars appeared overhead, Silas looked at her, truly looked. "You remember anything else?" he asked. She smiled, small and sad. "I remember how it felt to be safe." He touched her cheek with a blood-stained hand. We'll find that again. She nodded, then turned toward the town. Let's finish this. The wind kicked up around them, carrying the scent of firewood, gun oil, and something else. Hope, maybe. Or vengeance. They descended the cliff path together, shadows within shadows, silent and certain. The reckoning had begun. The fire started in the storehouse, small at first, just a flicker beneath the crates where the black powder was kept. Silas had struck the match with shaking hands, every breath feeling borrowed. Now he crouched behind a watering trough, watching flames lick their way toward the rooftops. Sparks flew skyward. Within moments, the sky over Perdition Flats blazed orange. Panic spread like oil. He didn't wait. Gun drawn, he crossed the square as people screamed, fled, and staggered from saloons, eyes wide with smoke and confusion. Clara was already moving. Dressed in a stolen cloak, she glided like shadow between buildings, reaching the livestock pens where the slaves had been gathered for the southbound caravan. There were 8 of them, young, gaunt, broken-eyed. But when Clara whispered, "We're getting out," something stirred. Something old. Something almost like faith. Silas slipped through the chaos, sticking to alleys, nerves taut as tripwire. Every step cost him. Blood soaked the bandage at his ribs, his breath rasping like wind through gravel. But pain had no hold on him now. He had one job left. One man left to kill. Maddox emerged from the sheriff's office, half-dressed, eyes bloodshot and pistol in hand. He scanned the burning square, barking orders, trying to take control of the storm. But Perdition Flats had never belonged to him, not really. Fear answered no one's orders. Silas called out, "Maddox." The name hit like a bullet. Maddox turned, squinting through the smoke. Then he saw him, coat charred, face half covered in blood and ash, gun leveled. "Well," Maddox sneered, raising his own weapon, "you just don't die easy, do you?" "I've been saving it," Silas said. They fired at the same time. Silas felt the wind of Maddox's bullet graze his temple, but his own shot found flesh. Maddox stumbled back, hand clutching his side. He didn't fall. Not yet. The crowd had vanished. The town square was theirs now, lit by firelight and hate. Silas advanced, slow and steady, ignoring the blood trailing from his coat. "You think you're a hero?" Maddox spat, voice strained. "Think this changes anything?" "No," Silas said. "I'm not a hero." He shot again. This one tore into Maddox's shoulder, spinning him into a pillar. Wood splintered. Maddox cried out but still didn't go down. Clara appeared behind him, breathless, the freed captives at her back. Her knife was bloody. One of the guards wouldn't be waking up. She locked eyes with Silas, nodded once. He understood. They had to finish it. Maddox raised his pistol with his last strength, aiming at her. Silas didn't hesitate. The final bullet struck Maddox in the throat. He collapsed, gagging, clutching at air. Then he stilled. Silas swayed, weapon lowering. A strange silence followed. Just the crackle of burning timbers, the soft weeping of a boy Clara had pulled from a cage. Then Clara ran to him. He nearly collapsed as she caught him under the arm. He was trembling, white with pain but alive. "It's over," she said. "Not yet," he rasped. "We have to get out before the canyon pass is closed. More men will come." She nodded and helped him walk. The rescued captives followed, some limping, some silent, all watching the flames devour Perdition Flats. They moved as one, a procession of the lost, leaving the ashes behind. An hour later, beneath the silver hush of a desert moon, they reached the canyon edge. Clara made a fire. Silas lay back against a rock, too weak to protest. The bleeding had slowed, but so had everything else. She sat beside him, watching the stars. "I don't know who I am without this place," she said. He looked at her, eyes soft. "You get to decide now. I don't remember enough." "You don't need to. You remember enough to fight. Enough to save them." He nodded toward the people clustered around the fire. "That's who you are." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he didn't flinch from the pain. "I thought I was nothing," she whispered. "But you saw me." "I never stopped seeing you," he said. He shifted, wincing. She turned to him quickly. "You need a doctor." "I need a minute." Her face folded with worry, but he gave her a small smile. "You did it, Clara. You brought light to a place that forgot what it looked like." Tears touched her lashes, but she didn't let them fall. He closed his eyes. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "Not now." "I'm tired," he murmured. "Let me rest. Just for a bit." She held his hand, clutching it tightly. "Okay. Just a bit." The night deepened. The fire crackled. Around them, the others slept in scattered circles, exhausted but free. Clara watched the man beside her, her father, as his breathing slowed. And when dawn touched the canyon walls in gold and fire, she sat upright, her hand still wrapped around his. He was still. But there was peace in his expression. She didn't scream, didn't wail. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the way he used to when bracing for a storm. Then she stood. She turned to the others, strangers not by blood but by fate, and they looked to her with wide, uncertain eyes. She spoke, clear and quiet. We head north. There's a town 3 days from here where no one knows our names. We build something new. That's what he would have wanted. They nodded. Some smiled. Others just wept quietly. As they gathered their things, Clara knelt by Silas's body, brushed a hand over his brow, and pressed the old, soot-scarred locket into his hand. You kept it, she whispered. Now I'll keep you. She rose, turned, and walked away, each step a promise. Behind her, Perdition Flats burned down to the bones. Ahead, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the name of a girl once lost, and the man who had remembered her. He came just to watch. He left having changed everything.